On today's show, the Nick Dowd line was huge in the Capitals' win over the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the competition for the final roster spots intensifies.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the victorious Capitals as they take down the Columbus Blue Jackets by a score of 3-2. And I know, Dan, it's a preseason game and it's not that important, but it is there are a lot of players that are vying for jobs. There are veterans that are working on their game, so they're full go for the start of the season. A huge win for the Capitals against the Blue Jackets. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about the outstanding performance by Logan Thompson, making a case that he could be the #1 netminder for the Capitals. And, you know, as we went into this season, I think the idea was that it was going to be Charlie Lindgren as the #1. And then some people said it's going to be more of a 1A, 1B situation. In any event, Logan Thompson has been absolutely huge for the Capitals. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about the multi-point game for Pierre-Luc Dubois. A little bit later, we'll talk about how Nick Dowd and his line was huge in the Capitals' success. We've heard that for the last few years, that the Nick Dowd line, primarily the fourth line, is huge. It was, again, against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about competitions around the training camp and these preseason games as it intensifies, as more cuts will be coming up here sooner than later. But just to get it going here, talking about the Capitals' big win. And today they're taking some much needed time to rest and relax and kind of just take it all in this group bonding, this team bonding moment. And it's good that they are able to do that coming off a big win. I mean, let's take a look at it. It has been busy around the Capitals and MedStar for quite some time, as the players were at MedStar in August and ramping up, up until where we are right now. And there's been a flurry of activity at either at MedStar Ice Complex or in a lot of these preseason games. So I think it's important to take a moment to take a breath, take stock of this team, and for this team to do just that, have these bonding opportunities that I think will, make this team even that much better once the puck drops in the first game. But talking about the game, last night, it was huge. The Caps were in Columbus. Wilson and Dubois each notched a goal and an assist for the Capitals in a 3-2 victory. Dowd also found the back of the net, contributing to a strong showing by that line, that Nick Dowd line. Between the pipes, Thompson delivered another impressive performance, making 24 saves. Miro registered a power play assist, while Vrana managed 2 shots on goal and drew a penalty. The Capitals are next back in action as they take on Boston coming up this weekend. But a nice victory, all things considered, and it's good to see this team gelling. As we saw the lines that were out there, we saw McMichael, Dubois, Wilson, Milano, LaPierre, Protas, Duhaime-Dowd-Raddysh, Vrana, Scarbosa, and Mirshnyshenko. And you're starting to see certain things take place. You take a look at the McMichael, Dubois, Wilson. we could definitely see that during the regular season. That could definitely be the second line for the Capitals. And then you take a look at some players like Milano, like I talked about in the last episode, that I think we need to see a whole lot more from. So I think that it was a good assessment. Some things remain the same. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Is Nick Dowd, regardless of who's on his line, he always brings the pain, and he brings the intensity, and he does it with a different supporting cast on a year-to-year basis. But huge for the Capitals to pick up another big win. But the star of the game, once again, I would say, is Logan Thompson has exceeded expectations, whether it's my expectations or a lot of other people's expectations. I knew that he was going to be good, but he has been stellar. And, when you take a look at it, why I kind of talked about, is there kind of like this, interesting situation brewing here that could Logan Thompson be the number one netminder, is that Charlie Lindgren didn't play so good in his last game. And I know, it's a preseason game and he hasn't seen a lot of action thus far, but Logan Thompson has been definitely a pleasant surprise for me. Logan Thompson delivered another exceptional performance for the Caps, showcasing agility, quick reflexes, and strong situational awareness in the crease. He knows where the puck's at any given moment, and he is confident, and confidence is very important when it comes to a netminder. Despite taking a hard hit in the third period, the 27-year-old goaltender demonstrated resilience and completed the game. He concluded the night with 24 saves on 26 shots, resulting in an impressive .923 save percentage. And it was a bit of a scary moment out there, as I'm like, this Logan Thompson that we're all hopped up and high on, is he going to get injured? It wasn't the case, and he completed the game, which was huge, and he was key in the Capitals winning the game. In Pierre-Luc Dubois' second game with the Capitals, he faced his former team, the Columbus Blue Jackets, marking a significant moment in his career. Dubois delivered a standout performance, contributing multi-points in the Capitals' 3-2 victory. And it had to be a bittersweet moment, a place where it all started for PLD, and he has been killing it out there. I know it's been a very small sample size, but I am hopeful, I'm optimistic about Pierre-Luc Dubois out there, whether it be on the first line or on the second line, and if he's playing with Ovechkin or whatever the case might be. I think that he has shown a lot of promise. He's got a good shot. He's got a good skating ability and another big frame out there that I think that he is going to be just fine for the Capitals. And already I've heard quite a bit of comments out there as I did that crossover episode with other hosts from the Metro, and I kind of checked out their YouTube page, and some people are saying, man, the guy's delusional. PLD is toxic no matter where he goes. And I'm thinking to myself, really? Wherever he goes, he had kind of an off season last season, but if you want to take a look at the back of his hockey card, it's pretty impressive. Back-to-back 60-point seasons, and I know that you can't live on former glory, but he definitely has an upside, and a young man at the end of the day. At 26 years old, let's not be too down in the dumps about a guy that I think has a pretty good upside. I would hate for someone to generalize my life as having a bad moment in my life if my whole life in total was going pretty well. And that's how I'm going to view Pierre-Luc Dubois, as he had a down season with the Kings. And when we take a look at it, that could be for a myriad of different reasons. I think it's coaching, misutilization, underutilization. He is going to get that fresh start with the Capitals, and I think he will prove a lot of different people wrong that kind of doubted him. Dubois, now 26 years old and on his fourth team in as many years, demonstrated a shift in mindset as he strives to make the most of his fresh start. And I think that Spencer Carberry, the carburetor, is going to be the guy that kind of coaxes out that inner greatness of Pierre-Luc Dubois. In this game, he exhibited exceptional speed, finesse, and a powerful shot. There's a reason that he was drafted high, while also displaying strong chemistry with teammate Tom Wilson, assisting on one goal and scoring another himself. Not too bad. And it's going to be interesting to see, if it does, in fact, be Tom Wilson and PLD on the same line together. That's going to be quite a thing out there with two huge frames out there at the same time, kind of a bull in the china shop, if you know what I mean. With 3 points in 2 preseason games, Dubois appears confident, rejuvenated, and focused on making a strong impression. His performance reflects his determination and potential, and he seems poised to continue this positive trajectory. It has been all positivity when it comes to Dubois. I think that at the end of the day, he just has to kind of shut out the negativity that is inevitably out there. But what I've seen from him thus far is promising. I want to see a whole lot more. I'm not going to say that he is going to be the greatest Capitals player out on the night, on the ice any given night, but what I have seen thus far has been encouraging. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Nick Dowd and the line that he plays on and how it is always important, the identity line, if you will, of the Capitals. Let's talk about it straight ahead. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And on any given Sunday, there is a lot of football to watch. I have my favorite teams, but maybe it's a Sunday and your team isn't playing. How about open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game? All of a sudden, those different games are that much more exciting. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team. Every day, make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. I'll have insider information. I'll have exclusive video and short form podcasts. So check out more information in the show description. All right, in this next segment here, let's talk about that Nick Dowd line, primarily the fourth line. But it's interesting that he is the constant, that there have been a lot of different players that have surrounded him. I'm talking Malenstein, Abe Kubel, I'm talking Protas, Garnet Hathaway, these different kind of players, Carl Hagelin. But the constant in all of that is Nick Dowd, a stellar player that 9 times out of 10 is playing on the fourth line. Darn near 10 times out of 10 is playing on the fourth line. And, one of the things that Spencer Carberry talked about is not to view the fourth line is like this disparaging thing or a pejorative that in a lot of ways it is. If you're looking at it statistically, you could call it the Capitals' first line. It's just that is how it's laid out. And Nick Dowd has been part of that secret sauce for the Capitals' primarily fourth line. And you take a look at it, there is a reason that at the trade deadline, there were a lot of the insiders, the premier insiders. I'm talking Frank Saravalli. I'm talking Elliot Friedman, that they said that Nick Dowd is going to be on the move, that there are a lot of teams that are blowing up BMAC's phone and to expect for him to be on the move. Well, Brian McClellan exercised patience and kind of had the ability to look down the football field a little bit and say, hey, I think he is going to be important in this next phase for the Capitals. And you take a look at it. Like I said, I've just talked about plugged and played all the different players that he played with. Now it's Duhaime and Raddysh. And what we've seen in this small sample size is that line is really good again. Nick Dowd is that constant. In a lot of ways, what I've observed and what I've heard is that he is almost like a coach on that fourth line, that when the players that play around him, when he speaks, they listen. His track record speaks for itself, and that line really stood up and played a huge role in the Capitals' success versus Columbus. So a huge evening for the Duhaime-Dowd-Raddysh line, formed after the Capitals acquired Brandon Duhaime and Taylor Raddysh in free agency, has proven to be an excellent combination. Their chemistry and synergy on the ice has been outstanding, with each player's strengths complementing the others perfectly in the first period. Duhaime's physical play set up the first goal. I love Duhaime's his physical presence. I love the fact that he has that physical flair that I think that is going to be key for that fourth line. As he aggressively forechecked and won possession of the puck, allowing Dowd to score, the line has already contributed 7 points In just 2 preseason games demonstrating their offensive prowess, Raddysh and his line mates have displayed impressive speed and pressure while also excelling in their defensive responsibilities. The early success of this line bodes well for the Capitals as they look ahead to the rest of the season. So, again, it was something that really stood out to me, and it was one of the things that former GM Brian McClellan addressed before he took a different position, and Chris Patrick was named with the GM, is there was a flurry of activity surrounding the Capitals around July 1st. And in a lot of ways, I heard that Malenstein is going out to the Sabres. I heard Abe Kubel is going out to the Sabres. And I was thinking to myself, well, who's going to play in the fourth line? That fourth line that has been stellar is the band's been broke up. But what did he do? He went out and he addressed those needs, setting up Chris Patrick in a good position. And from a small sample size, it does appear that Duhaime-Raddysh and Dowd is going to be another great fourth line for the Capitals this coming season. So BMAC definitely had a knack for kind of seeing the lay of the land and kind of addressing certain situations and knowing, hey, I think that Duhaime, that Raddysh, that might just work fine for the Capitals on the fourth line. But make no mistake about it, that Nick Dowd is the one that stirs the drink on that fourth line any given night. You could not just plug and play any other center into that position. I mean, you could, but I don't think you would see the results that Nick Dowd has on that line. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, why BMAC decided to hold on to him. What is the long-term plans for him? That I don't know, as we know that this team is making changes and it's going into the direction of getting younger. But with that being said, you also want distinguished veteran leaders on the team. And like I talked about, when Nick Dowd speaks, his line mates listen. And I think that he casts a wide shadow. And I think that that is why he has been really important, primarily on the Capitals' fourth line. But again, this is all coming together like a beautiful symphony. We're starting to see Ovechkin. We're starting to see Dylan Strome and Andrew Mangiapane. That could very well be that first line. And you go down, you take a look at the second line and how that's looking there, that it could potentially be PLD. It could be Tom Wilson. It could be Mick Michael. There is a lot to be excited about. You take a look at the third line. We've seen that mixed and matched. I guess there's some questions associated with that, but what I've seen thus far has been encouraging. You take a look at the performances of Logan Thompson. You take a look at how that Nick Dowd line played. There is a lot to be encouraged about and hopeful, ultimately, at the end of the day, about what this team is going to look like when the puck drops in the very first game of the season. As we get closer, I would expect in the next game coming up here against Boston that we're going to start to see pretty much the final product. Like, this is what this team is going to look like, give or take. And it's exciting because, you take a look at the Capitals last season, they fell short of where a lot of people had hoped, making it to the playoffs. But one thing I know for sure is that when you have a rock solid fourth line, yes, I'm going to go ahead and say a fourth line of Nick Dowd out there, and Raddysh and Duhaime is what we see right now. There's a lot to be hopeful about. If you can even get one solid line like that, that is kind of, if you take a look around the NHL, usually it's some AHL player, some snarled old vets that's playing on that fourth line. Not the case for the Capitals. Some truly premier talent there, and Nick Dowd is definitely leading the charge all of the way. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about competition at the camp in these preseason games as it intensifies. Who will reign victorious and get a sweater when the regular season starts in the first game? I'll discuss straight ahead. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And it's one of the things that's frustrating for me. My favorite band comes to town, my favorite stand-up comedian, and I can't find tickets, or if I can find them, I'm thinking to myself, what is the view of the stage going to look like from where I'm sitting? So take the guesswork work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So talking about the competition, and I guess we ultimately won't know until we know when the first game is played who's going to be on this team. Well, we'll know a little bit before then, but as of right now, it is a bit ambiguous. We don't know ultimately who is going to be on the ice, who's going to crack the roster. Is there a crazy possibility that 19-year-old Andrew Crystal makes the team? How about even Mirshnyshenko? How about Scarbosa? How about all of these players? There's a lot of excitement. And who are your favorites out there? Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218, at Locked On Caps, or on YouTube. Do you have favorites? Who do you want to see crack the roster? I think that Crystal's pretty excited, and exciting for me, the prospect of him being on this team. And like I've said, I know it's important not to have favorites, but I like their game. I like Crystal's game. I like the possibility that Dylan McIlrath might make the team. Who saw that? If that was on your prediction to start this season, then hey, maybe we got to listen to you a little bit more often. But hey, listen, when I'm talking Dylan McIlrath, the things that I like about his game is his physicality, and that is some of the hallmarks. That is some of the intrinsic qualities of this Capitals team, has been for years. So it's going to be interesting to see who makes it. You got Alexiev, all these different players that are in the mix. Ultimately, who is going to be the last men standing? Talking about the Capitals training camp roster, the Caps training camp roster is currently comprised of 30 players. Tarek Parasek has been sent to the WHL Prince George Cougars after an extended stint with the Capitals at the training camp, leaving 28 healthy skaters vying for 23 spots due to injuries to Backstrom and Oshie. Remaining players such as Jacob Vrana, Andrew Crystal, even Mirshnyshenko, Mike Scarbosa, and Dylan McIlrath have yet to prove their readiness for the NHL. Additionally, Ethan Bear and Alex Alexiev are still competing for the spots on the blue line. As much as I like the story of that Ethan Bear is, he got his head straight and that he's headed in the right direction, I kind of see him being the odd man out. If I was going to say, I would say that like an Alexiev or Dylan McIlrath, those are some of my favorites on the blue line. And one of the things, and it's interesting how life changes when you talk about Ethan Bear, and it changed a lot in a lot of different ways for him as well. But I just really haven't seen that same compete level that I've seen from someone, say, like Dylan McIlrath, who's got that physical snarl that takes some of the pressure off Tom Wilson to be the tough guy. And Tom Wilson relishes, I think, at times playing the tough guy, but I think that Tom Wilson is better served playing on the ice than spending time in the penalty box or being suspended. So if that role can get kind of sent over to Dylan McIlrath, if he can designate Dylan McIlrath to take on some of that tough guy role in the absence of like Garnet Hathaway and that kind of thing, then I think it could be huge, because without a guy like Dylan on the team, there's not as many tough guys as there were years ago. And despite what people say, the tough guys, the enforcers, they still have a role in the National Hockey League. But talking about next forward competition at training camp, the competition at forward is becoming increasingly intriguing as we evaluate the current situations. It's striking that despite the ongoing challenges, Crystal, at only 19 years old, has shown remarkable consistency, recording points in each of his 3 preseason appearances. Even though we saw, in the second game that he played that Spencer Carberry wasn't thrilled, all things considered, Crystal has played lights out hockey. His performance for Washington has been particularly impressive, potentially warranting an extended opportunity. How is that going to manifest itself? Well, like I talked about, Sonny Milano we're going to need to see more from him. I'm not totally sold on him. Asking me right now, I would rather have Crystal and Jacob Vrana in the lineup, one of those guys being the healthy scratch on any given night. Probably, if I'm going to bet, I would say it would be like a Jacob Vrana I think that would be the best position for the Capitals to be in. But also look at Sgarbossa as kind of that dark horse candidate as well, that potentially he could fit in there as well. I think more, of an outsider possibility that Sgarbossa joins this team. He stepped up and played admirably for the Capitals, but then faced injuries towards the end of the season and then got kind of pushed out of position a little bit there. But that is the interesting thing to follow. Simultaneously, Vrana, who is currently on a PTO, is aiming to secure a place back on the team that initially selected him in the first round in 2014. His strong showing in camp, coupled with a goal and an assist in 3 preseason games, has emphasized his speed, precise shooting, and relentless forechecking ability. According to Spencer Carberry, though, he was not in love with the Vrana line in the last game. But all things considered, I think that Vrana is going to make the team. I really do believe it. And I'm not going to say that he is going to have a job opening night, going to be playing out there, but he could be a healthy scratch. But there's injuries. There's a whole lot of things to consider. But I do think that Vrana, I do think that Crystal and Miro are going to make it very, very interesting. Talking about defensive players, the blue liners, as there are intriguing storylines everywhere, the effort put in by Miro to secure his spot on the team has been undeniable. So that he's been huge with the Capitals blue line. And that's the thing, is he has a lot of different things in his skill set. But talking about those defensive players, like I talked about as well, is who's going to make that. I'm talking Dylan McIlrath. I'm talking Alexiev, Ethan Bear. Those are the intriguing lines to follow. But as we widen the lens a little bit more, is that we talk about Miro. And when I'm talking about Miro, I think that to a certain extent, we've seen some greatness from him, right? But I also think that Crystal and I also think that Vrana kind of maybe have the upper hand there. And, I might get some heat for that, but I think that Miro is going to have a spot on this team in years to come, or potentially later this season. But kind of my knee-jerk reaction is that Crystal and Vrana will join the team if, in fact, like Milano doesn't cut it. If Milano stays here, then I think that it's going to be interesting. Then I think it's going to be Vrana who gets the job. There are a lot of moving pieces. There's also, other things to consider as far as, trades. If these guys don't live up to potential, could, potentially some of these guys get traded. But that is kind of my knee-jerk reaction on it, is that Crystal and Vrana will find a spot on this team. But that's going to mean that another player is going to be expendable. I'm talking primarily about Sonny Milano, but Miro is still in it. I think that to a certain extent, he's on the outside looking in. Throughout the preseason, the Russian winger has consistently showcased his impressive shot accuracy, speed, and physicality, making a strong impression on the coaching staff. Additionally, Sgarbossa, known for his reliability as a bottom 6 center, remains a contender for a roster spot, adding an element of unpredictability to the team's lineup. If you're asking me about Sgarbossa, I don't think he makes the lineup, but I do think he will be a player that is called up during the season when injuries rear their ugly head. That's kind of inevitable at any given season. So that is my reaction. That is just kind of me, just kind of calling it as I see it, sticking my finger to the air and kind of seeing the lay of the land. That's what I see happening. But in terms of the defense, McIlrath has been asserting himself as a viable candidate for the team, emphasizing his physical presence, leadership qualities, and unwavering work ethic. I think the Capitals are really hot on Dylan McIlrath. They like his game. He's no guy that's, green to the league. He has NHL history. He has AHL experience that I think he could be huge. But talking about, that outsider again, I think that Bear is kind of on the outside looking in. I think that he's made a valiant effort, but at the end of the day, I don't see him cracking the big team. Next, let's talk about goaltending. That's all but set. We know that it's going to be Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren, or is it going to be Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson? It's going to be a little bit of both, honestly, at the end of the day, but what we've seen thus far is that Logan Thompson has been lights out. And, the pressure is one of the things to consider when it comes to Charlie Lindgren. How is it going to be when there's a guy kind of breathing down his neck a little bit like, you okay out there, buddy? Because if you're not okay, I mean, I can come out there and play just as good as you can. I know that's not how professional hockey's played, but I think if you can kind of get into someone's head a little bit and you kind of put the pressure on them, it can have good effects. It could have bad effects. I think, to a certain extent, it's going to bring out the best. But at the end of the day, too, I think that if you have two premier netminders, is that going to create any sort of tension? I think that at the end of the day, the Capitals will benefit from any tension or, rivalry that goes out on the ice. But talking about Hunter Shepard as well, continues to be with the team, but as anticipated that he will be reassigned to Hershey, given the strong goaltending tandem of Lindgren and Thompson. As the Capitals prepare to commence the season, they're focused on maximizing salary cap utilization. This strategic approach partly explains why Shepard and others remain with the team for the time being. So it's going to be, an interesting storyline to follow. I would expect that Hunter Shepard is going to get the first one to get called up in the event that Lindgren or Thompson gets injured. But also in that same breath, a premier netminder is Clay Stevenson. I still do think he is the long-term solution in net for the Capitals. He is younger than Hunter Shepard as we take a look that Hunter Shepard is entering into a contract season. Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren, all three netminders are entering into contract seasons. A lot's at stake. At the end of the day, I think that one of those netminders gets the extension, whether it be Logan Thompson or Charlie Lindgren. And at the end of the day, my thoughts on Hunter Shepard is that if there's not a spot for him on the Capitals this coming season at some point, or if there's no plans for him in the future, then I think we need to view him as an asset and find a spot for him somewhere else. You know what they say, if you love someone, set them free. It's a little dramatic, but in any event, Hunter Shepard, I think, is an important part of this team. But if there's no long-term plans for him on the team, do the right thing by Hunter Shepard and see if you can find a job for him somewhere else, hopefully in the NHL or the AHL. Listen, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and making it your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, go find Locked On NHL, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team. It is every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.